We're here back at the Fantasy Bar Week 14 on tap. 6 of my favorite plays on FanDuel and DraftKings, including a couple of my favorite correlated plays in certain games, a value wide receiver to help ease some salary costs, and a beast of the week that has dominated his opponent. Who are we talking about? Belly up to the Fantasy Bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 14 edition Beers Daily Fantasy Six-Pack. Welcome back to the Fantasy Bar. Appreciate y'all for stopping by and checking out the video. Before we get into the plays for week 14, take a second, click that thumbs up button. Greatly appreciate it. Helps us out tremendously here on YouTube. That is the tip jar here in the Fantasy Bar. Also, subscribe to the channel. Got this video going out. My pints and picks, which have been hot, 5-1 over the last 3 weeks with my favorite NFL bets each and every week. And of course, NBA videos a couple times a week. So subscribe. Don't miss any of the content. And speaking of sports betting, head over to scoresandodds.com/beer. That link in the description of the video. Great site, tons of great information. Check it out today. All right, week 14 on tap. Let's get rolling at the running back position with DeAndre Swift of the Lions. So Swift starting to get back to what we saw early in the season. There's been some concerns with injuries. His role in this offense, Jamal Williams, vulturing all the touchdowns, but saw a season-high 18 touches last week. That matched his touch total from week 1, and we know how involved this guy can be in the passing game. This is a great matchup for a guy like DeAndre Swift. 7 targets per game over the last couple weeks, and Minnesota has really struggled with pass-catching running backs. Bottom 6 in receptions allowed, receiving yards allowed to the running back position. Huge total in this game, and DeAndre Swift's role is only going to continue to grow. Prices too cheap out there, especially on DraftKings at just $5,800. All right, let's go to the other side of that game. Have a little fun here with the revenge narrative. Tight end TJ Hockenson. Now, it's not just the narrative that we're after here. The stats, the matchup all come together here, and this is where narratives can really pay off here. Now, Hockenson, we know, been very involved in this Minnesota passing attack, averaging 8 targets per game since coming over from the Detroit Lions. Well, Justin Jefferson, always a huge focus of any defense, along with Dalvin Cook. So Hockenson not going to see a ton of defensive attention here, even against his former team. Now, the Lions, second most touchdowns allowed to the tight end position. I've already given up 8 to tight ends. Third most fantasy points allowed per game to this position as well. We mentioned big total in this game. I'm expecting a shootout. I'm expecting Hockenson to be a big part of this attack. I think he finds the end zone here against his former team. All right, let's get you some value next at the wide receiver position with Kendall Hinton of Denver. Now, we know Courtland Sutton listed doubtful, likely not going to play in this game. Jerry Jeudy, questionable. Sounds like he'll play, but dealing with an injury. What kind of health is he looking at? He's a lot more expensive than Kendall Hinton. And Greg Dulcich looking like a very, very highly owned tight end here in this game for a value tight end. So Hinton can kind of slide between the cracks here and potentially go lower owned than he should be at these prices. DraftKings specifically, $3,400 is really going to help you out in your cash games and in your tournaments. Now, last week, definitely a dud for Hinton. I think it's going to scare people away. But what I'm looking at, played almost 90% of the snaps last week. I don't think that role shrinks any here, and a great spot here. Denver, big underdogs at home, likely going to be playing from behind, likely going to be throwing a ton. Even as bad as Russell Wilson has been, he's going to put the ball in the air 40, 45 times in this game. Hinton likely going to see 7, 8, potentially up to 10 targets in this game. Now, Kansas City has struggled against the pass, 26 in DVOA, 4th most fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. Kendall Hinton, great value this week on both sides. All right, let's go to the quarterback position. Let's get some more value here with Tyler Huntley of Baltimore. So Lamar Jackson Light, as I like to call him, steps in here with Jackson on the shelf, gives you big time upside, and you're not really paying the price that you would have to pay for this ceiling upside, even in this matchup with Pittsburgh. You know, very good defensively, likely an uglier game here, but Huntley gives us that rushing upside we're certainly looking for in our quarterbacks. Carried the ball 10 times last week, went over 40 yards, found the end zone. I don't think that's going to change. Very similar game plan. Lamar's out, Huntley's in. Still going to be very run heavy here, specifically with the quarterback position. Now, Pittsburgh, we know, has struggled against the pass. Second most touchdown passes allowed, 22 on the season, and bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position. So Huntley gives us a lot of upside, minimum price. Taking my shots here in week 14. All right, back to the wide receiver position next with Christian Kirk of Jacksonville. So targets galore here in this Jacksonville offense. We know a very condensed target tree here for the Jaguars here. Kirk has seen 7 or more targets in 5 straight games. In fact, over the last 5 weeks, this guy's averaging 9 targets per game. So exactly what we want from our wide receivers. Now, a couple things that can help us out here. Trevor Lawrence listed as questionable, sat out Wednesday's practice. Sounds like he's going to give it a go, going to play and be fine. That may scare people away. Zay Jones, kind of the darling right now. Seeing a ton of targets as well. He's cheaper. That should help us out on the ownership as well. And as I always say, sometimes you pay up to be contrarian. I think this is a spot here for Christian Kirk. Great spot for any of these Jags receivers. And if you choose to go the Zay Jones route, Tennessee, 4th most receptions allowed to this position, 2nd most receiving yards allowed, most touchdowns allowed, 17 already to the wide receiver position. And you add all that up, obviously, most fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position as well. Christian Kirk, great pay up to be contrarian spot here this week against the Tennessee Titans. All right, it's time to take a look at my favorite play for week 14. Before we do that, let's continue our Beast of the Week contest. Easy to play, free to play. Most importantly, a thank you to you guys for your support here in the Fantasy Bar. All you got to do, get in the comment section right below the video and guess fantasy points on FanDuel this week. For my Beast of the Week, the closest guess is going to win themselves a free week of RotoGrinders Premium. Chance to jump in and check everything out behind the scenes. All right, let's wrap this baby up. My favorite play for week 14, you know, Mass, the Beast of the Week. All right, Beast time. We're going to continue with our correlations. We owe you one more running back. That means that's right. We're going to Tennessee. We're going with the big dog, Derrick Henry, this week's Beast of the Week. So Henry's absolutely dominated this Jacksonville team. We had Henry in the spot earlier this season in a similar spot where he had dominated the Houston Texans, and he went off in that matchup over 200 yards. I think we could get similar performance here for Henry. 12 rushing touchdowns for Henry over just the last 6 meetings with Jacksonville. If we narrow that scope down to the last 2 games, we're talking 345 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns in those last 2 games. Has had a couple of down games lately, and I think what that's going to do is have people looking elsewhere on the higher end. We talked about Justin Jefferson, guy like Christian McCaffrey. There's a lot of high-end plays that people may choose over Derrick Henry. I think that's a mistake here. The Titans, home favorite, checks that box for us. The matchup we already talked about with a strong history, we'll check that box. In Jacksonville, 9th most DraftKings points allowed to the running back position. Another check mark here. Derrick Henry checking all the boxes here easily. My favorite play on the board in this week's Beast of the Week. All right, guys, that wraps up for week 14 with 6 of my favorite plays on FanDuel and DraftKings. If you have any comments, questions, feedback, hit me up in that comment section right below the video here on YouTube. And who is your Beast of the Week? I want to know who your top play is. If you were 10 in the bar, sound off in that comment section. For RotoGrinders.com, I am Beer saying salut, guys. Best of luck here in week 14. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, thanks for checking out our videos. If you want more expert advice on DraftKings, FanDuel, or any other daily fantasy sports, make sure you check out the current videos playlist